Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be learning about the poem When Great Trees Fall, written by Maya Angelou. Before we start, let us look at what we will be doing in this video. We will be learning about the poet, introduction to the poem, we will be discussing the key points in the poem, we will be analyzing the poem, we will be discussing the various themes in the poem, and finally we will be identifying the various figures of speech which include poetic devices. So first, let us look about the poet. The poet Maya Angelou was an American memoirist, poet, and civil rights activist. She published 7 autobiographies, 3 books of essays, several books of poetry, and is credited with a list of plays, movies, and television shows spanning over 50 years. She received dozens of awards and more than 50 honorary degrees. Now, let us look at the introduction to the poem. In this poem, When Great Trees Fall, the poet speaks of loss as a traumatic yet inevitable part of the human experience that leaves one in despair and misery. This is a beautiful poem that highlights the fact that death, though inevitable, is a natural process and impacts the life of everyone connected with the departed souls. When great souls die, our minds and our hearts sense the change and languish for at least some time. However, the beauty of life is that the human beings eventually recover from this loss. Just like the natural world, new growth comes up, though not identical to what it was, but beautiful and bustling nevertheless. Thus, those bereaved by the loss of great souls can make meaning from the knowledge that they existed and touched their lives. You will understand better as we move forward. Now let us look at few key points in this poem. When big trees fall in a forest, they affect rocks on distant hills as well as animals like lions and elephants. When big trees fall, even little creatures curl up in silence, too shocked to be scared. When great people die, the loss affects the hearts of all those who have been touched by their greatness in some way or the other. When great people die, those tied up with them in their existence find the world no longer bright, warm, or filled with potential. With the passage of time, after the death of great people, the empty space left by those souls are eventually filled and healing takes place. Now, let us look at the analysis of the poem. This is a very beautiful yet deep poem with lots of meaning. So, it is very important to understand it clearly and have clarity in the concepts. Therefore, I will be going line by line so that you can make every line clear in your mind and also so that you will be able to understand the poem better. Also make sure that as I explain, you take down the keywords and also the key points so that it will be helpful for you later. So let us move on. Stanza 1. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. So here the poet is talking about what happens when great trees fall. The poet says that rocks on distant hills they shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. So when great trees fall, three things happen. First is relating to the rocks. The rocks on distant hills, they shudder. Second is about the lions. The lions hunker down in tall grasses. And third is about the elephants. Even the elephants lumber after safety. So the poet says that when big trees in the forest fall, their impact is felt far and wide. The rocks on distant hills feel vibration and they shudder. Shudder here means to shake suddenly. It suggests that the landscape itself trembles with fear. So similarly, the poet says that the lions hunker down in tall grasses. Hunker down means to, crunch down or, to bend a little. And the elephants lumber after safety. Lumber means they move, slowly or heavily, and they look for a, place to be safe. They search for safety. Now, why has the poet referred here to the rocks, to the lions and elephants? Because all the three things mentioned here are associated with strength and power. Large rocks on the hilltops are heavy and they cannot be moved. Similarly, lions are supposed to be fearsome and very fearsome predators, and they are the kings of the jungle. Whereas elephants are very huge, enormous, they are slow moving creatures. The poet says that even though all of them are very strong and majestic and powerful, yet all of them feel the impact of the falling of the trees with fear. Fear is the common feeling that is felt between all the three things mentioned here. So the poet is trying to say that the falling of great trees shakes up everything around them. There is nothing that is left unshaken. In this stanza, the poet has used the example of the great trees in the forest to convey her thoughts. She says that when great trees fall in the forest, the impact is felt far and wide in the woods. Both small and large creatures are shocked. The small creatures we see in the next stanza are affected, and in this stanza we see the big powerful creatures are also affected. The mention of the effect on large rocks on the top of the hills as well as lions and elephants, it reflects how powerful the impact of such loss is. It makes even the strongest and most fearsome elements of the natural world to come to a state of shock. Similarly, the poet is trying to say that the death of great individuals shake the world around them. In their absence, the life-giving air appears to be scarce. Here in the first line itself, the speaker of the poem has metaphorically used the fall of trees to compare the loss of great souls and says that the impact will be felt far and wide. The speaker has used the image of a huge tree falling to explain how far and wide the impact of this loss is felt. The speaker first describes its impact through nature. Here the poet says that when great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and the elephants, which are immovable or slow moving, they lumber after safety. In other words, the poet is trying to say that death shakes even the immovable objects such as rocks, and it causes fear in the fearless such as lions. Even elephants lumber after safety, which says that even the mightiest might feel powerless after losing their loved ones. So it describes the general impact of losing one's loved ones regardless of how it happens or where that loss takes place. The poet describes the loss of a great person as being similar to the falling of a great tree in a forest. So when a great tree falls, it affects everything in its surroundings, the rocks, the lions, even the elephants, and it causes a change even in the mightiest of creatures. I hope I made this stanza clear. Let us move on to the second stanza. Stanza 2. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, and their senses are eroded beyond fear. Here the poet talks about what happens to the small things when great trees fall. The small things, they recoil into silence and their senses are eroded beyond fear. Now what does this mean? The speaker says that not only huge animals but also small creatures are impacted by the fall of big trees in the forests. The poet says that they recoil into silence and they are so shaken and shocked that they cannot feel anything at all. The only sense of feeling that they can feel is just fear. Now here recoil means to draw back in fear. So when great trees fall, small things, they withdraw from what they were doing and their senses are eroded beyond fear, which means they are worn out. They are not able to feel any feeling or any sensation. The speaker says that the falling of great trees in the forest causes even the small things to recoil into silence. So this means that it shows us the way people fall into silence in the midst of despair. The bereaved are not even sure of what they feel, for their senses are eroded beyond fear. This tells us about the numbness of heart and soul that often follows the loss of someone close to the heart. Now, in the first stanza, we saw what happens to great, immovable, and powerful things when great trees fall. Now, here the poet is talking about small things. What happens to them? Small things recoil into silence, which means they withdraw from what they were doing. Now, if you've seen, after a person loses his or her loved ones, they become silent. They do not have the old cheer or the old laughter or happiness in them. They become silent and quiet. So the same way, small things recoil into silence. The people who are not very powerful or mighty, the normal people who would love them and be around them, they recoil into silence. They become silent. Their senses eroded beyond fear. This refers to the numbness of heart. They do not have any feeling. They do not feel any sensation other than fear. They are too insensitive right now to even get the sensation of a feeling. Their sensations are numb and they're not able to feel any feeling that follows the loss of someone. It talks about silence even in the midst of despair or agony. I hope this is clear. Let us move on to the third stanza. Stanza 3. Now this is a very interesting as well as deep stanza that you need to understand. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpened, examines and gnaws on kind words unsaid and promised walks never taken. So here in the first two stanzas, the poet was metaphorically talking about what happens when great trees fall. Now the poet is directly talking about what happens when great souls die. The poet leaves the metaphorical great trees and straightaway comes to the point and talks about what happens when great souls die. The poet is directly talking about the death of great people. The poet says that when our loved ones, when great people die, the air around us becomes light, rare and sterile. Now what does this mean? Light, rare, sterile. Rare means scarce, it's not available in plenty. Sterile means barren or lifeless. It does not have any life, it does not have any spirit in it. So this means that the poet is trying to tell us that when great souls die, it leaves a vacuum in the lives of their loved ones. That is, it appears as if all the air has been sucked out of a room and it becomes very hard to breathe. That's why the air around us becomes light, rare and sterile. You don't find life as easy as before. It becomes even difficult to breathe. Otherwise the loved ones, they take small shallow breaths. It's not like they are living. It feels like they are only surviving. Without the presence of the great souls, it does not feel like they are living like before. It feels like they are only surviving with little air. So here the poet talks about, uses a plural, the air around us. So, what the poet means by talking about the air around us suggests that when the great souls died, they have touched the lives of many people, and so their loss is felt widely. The use of such pronouns tells us that the loss of great souls not only affects their loved ones, but it affects entire humanity. Now here the poet says that we breathe briefly and our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. The speaker says that the people who have lost their loved ones find their senses overwhelmed by the loss of their loved ones. She says that the eyes see only briefly. This says that these short bursts of sight are shown by a hurtful clarity. Here it means that after the loss of a person's loved ones, it becomes painfully clear to them that the world has changed forever. They do not see anything at all, but when they do see, they see that things will never be the same without the presence of the great soul in their lives. Let me once again make that clear for you. When great souls die, air around us becomes light, rare and sterile. We feel like it becomes very hard to breathe. Feels like we are not living, we are just surviving. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with hurtful clarity. All our senses are affected by the loss of our loved ones, and our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. This says that we do not see anything most of the time, but when we do see, it becomes painfully clear that life has changed forever and things will never be the same without the presence of the great soul in our lives. I hope this is clear. Our memory suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, and promised walks never taken. So here the poet is talking about what happens in the absence of our loved ones. Here the speaker goes on to say that the sadness seems to intensify the memory by making recollection suddenly sharper. That is, we remember the moments spent with our loved ones and now we have lost them. The poet says that our memory gnaws on missed opportunities, which tells us that people find themselves unable to stop themselves from thinking about all the things they should have said to and the time that they should have spent with the one they have lost. That's why the poet says our memory becomes suddenly sharpened. Suddenly we start thinking about the things that we should have done, and our memory starts examining on the past memories and the past things that we should have done. Now here the word loss means that with loss comes a terrible emptiness, and the grieving allows the bereaved to keep this emptiness at bay by gnawing on the things that we could have done. So here by saying that our memory gnaws on kind words, the speaker is referring to the feelings of regret that often triggers a person who has lost someone dear. This regret may be due to the kind words unsaid and the promised walks never taken. Having never fulfilled these intentions leaves the bereaved person with pain, of despair and regret of what they could have done to their loved ones. In this para, we see that the bereaved gradually begin to see things with sudden bursts of sharp, painful clarity, especially the memories of the days spent with the departed souls. They regret the words they did not say and the promises that they did not keep when this person was alive. They feel like the world has become sterile and hostile with the departure of those who nurtured them and all those around them. I hope this stanza is clear. Let us move on to the fourth stanza, stanza 4. Great souls die, and our reality bound to them takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. So the stanza begins with the words, great souls die. So this tells us that death is an inevitable part of life. The loss of these souls truly alters a person's reality. So the poet says that when great souls die, our reality bound to them takes leave of us. So this is because their reality was bound to these souls. So when such souls are gone, the world appears to be unrecognizable, or it feels like it is turned upside down. Then the poet says that when great souls die, our souls, dependent on their nurture, now shrink and they wizened. Then the poet says that our minds, which are formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. Now, what does this mean? The speaker makes a comparison between great trees and great souls by saying that, like great trees in the forest, they provide shelter and sustenance for many creatures. In the same way, great people support and nourish those around them. So when such people leave the world, those left behind are robbed of this nourishment that the great souls provided. They feel like their souls are suddenly starving and they have shrunk to become shriveled up. Now here, vision refers to being wrinkled with age or to have shrunk down. Poet says that when great souls die, our reality bound to them takes leave of us. We cannot recognize the world because we were completely dependent on these great souls. Our souls dependent on their nurture. We were dependent on their nourishment and shelter and support. And when they leave the world, we do not get the love, care and nourishment that we once used to get under their care. And our souls, which were dependent on their nurture, now without all the nourishment and support, now our souls are shrinking and they have wizened. The speaker further says that similarly they lose their minds, which were formed and informed by the radiance of these loved ones. Here the terms formed and informed emphasizes the immense influence that the great souls had on their loved ones. They did not only inform the people, but they also formed the way the people thought. They shaped the way of thinking and they helped in forming the minds of their loved ones. So here we can see that the speaker provides an insight to the mental and emotional effects of losing someone close. The speaker says that the death of a loved one can truly change a person's reality as one's soul depends on the nurture from the great soul, and when that person dies, it leaves one feeling small, as if one's very soul has shrunk. The poem describes the way in which one's mind can be formed and informed by their radiance, and the way the laws can be felt through their minds have fallen away. Just as the other plants and animals are dependent on the nurturing of the presence of the great tree, communities thrive and grow under the leadership of great individuals. But when such individuals die, the whole system that grew up around them appears to have collapsed, and even the reality that helped defines seems to disappear. Now, further, the speaker goes ahead and says that we are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of the dark, cold caves. Now, what does this mean to tell us? The unutterable ignorance of the dark, cold caves. This means the speaker is trying to say that despite the loss due to the death of a loved one, the bereaved are not so much maddened to have been reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves, which means that the despair felt by the bereaved person is described as a dark, cold cave. The poet says that the feeling of despair is so strong that it feels almost unutterable. Another version of a dark, cold cave is the loneliness and incomprehension that accompany such a loss. Now, here, unutterable means unspeakable, not able to put into words and express. Maddened means to be made angry by, the loss of a loved one. The speaker identifies with others who have felt this loss by using a second person's point of view. When the speaker says that we are not so much maddened, it suggests that the speaker feels a sense of despair at the loss. So this despair is what she represents as dark, cold caves. The feelings are so strong that they are unutterable. They cannot be put into words. The speaker says that the death of a great personality causes people's senses to be eroded. People feel as if it is not an individual that has gone, but their vision for the world has taken leave and leaves the world to look like dark, cold caves for the loved ones. So in this stanza, we see that the tree's death utterly shakes up the environment once it nurtured. This metaphorical setting tells us that the impact of the falling of a huge tree in the forest is similar as the death of a great person, since the loss of someone truly special can be felt in every direction. So this stanza basically tells us what happens to a person whose loved one has taken leave, and it also tells us what happens to the world after the great souls have died. I hope this is clear. Let us go ahead to the fifth stanza. This stanza tells us about healing and how the bereaved will live after the death of the great soul. So let us move on to stanza 5. When great souls die, after a period peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed, they existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. So even this last stanza, like all the other stanza, begins with the repetition that when great souls die, it repeats the first line. But here the speaker has used an and. So this tells us that the speaker is finally winding up things. Here the speaker, instead of talking about the grief and loss, talks about what eventually fills up the empty spaces left behind by the great souls. So what does the speaker say? The speaker says that after a period, peace blooms. Now what happens to the loved ones after a time when the great souls die? After a period, peace blooms eventually, slowly, right? Which means eventually and always irregularly. Now here the poet says that time allows healing to occur and a period of time blooms in some time. Eventually it happens. And the use of the word blooms tells us that healing follows grief, just like spring flowers follow the emptiness of winter. So peace comes slowly and irregularly. And then the poet says that spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. This means that there exists a comforting feeling, a new spark of something coming back to life. Now, spaces here means when our loved ones, died, they left us, they had a space in our heart. So once they die, that space becomes empty. So it is that space that the poet is talking about, and seeing the spaces they fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. It means that after some time there will be a sense of comfort, there will be a sense of new spark of something coming back to life. So when the loved one departs, there appears to be a hole in the world. However, these holes do not last forever. The speaker says that grief, fear and despair, they do not last forever. And furthermore, the speaker says that our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. So this allows people to think, feel and perceive the world again, although the perception will never be the same as it was earlier. The speaker says that though after the death of our loved ones, we feel sad and we are grieved at heart, these feelings do not last forever because our senses will be restored but even though our senses are restored, they will never be like earlier. They will never be like when our loved ones were with us. And though our senses come back to us, though we again perceive the sense of feelings, they will never be like before. They will never be the same. So even though after some time eventually our senses are restored, it will never be the same as it was earlier. The loved ones feel their senses whisper to them to remind them that the great souls who died, they once existed. They existed, they existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. So the senses which are restored, but they will never be the same like before. They whisper to us, they remind us that the people whom we have lost, the great souls who have died, they once existed. Although they are gone now, nothing can change the fact that those souls once existed here and that they inspired those who knew them. The living can continue to be and be better, knowing that the great souls were with them at one point of time. Here we see the poet repeating, they existed, they existed. It tells us that the fact of death does not change the fact that these people lived and shed their radiance around them. And their existence will continue to inspire the brevet to keep on living and try to make the world a better place in spite of the pain they suffered after losing the great souls. In this stanza, the poet suggests that initially for the brevet, the grief caused by the loss of their loved ones may feel consuming. But with the passage of time, they are able to accept the loss and they are at ease by remembering the contributions made by the great souls they have lost. The poet has rightly described that all of this happens when the great trees fall or when great souls die. Once again, let me summarize this for you. The poet says that when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. So the spaces or the void created by such people, they do not remain forever. The poem suggests that the bereaved people find comfort by remembering how these great souls improved the world with their presence. It applies universally to the experience of losing someone important and the ways in which even the most powerful will experience grief and with the passage of time gives way to acceptance. So when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms slowly and irregularly, and the spaces left in our hearts or spaces left in the world filled, that are left by the loss of our loved ones, the empty spaces are filled with soothing electric vibration, and our senses, though never like before, slowly we start to restore our senses and start getting the feelings, and we start perceiving emotions. Our senses whisper to us that they existed, our loved ones existed. It is repeated twice because it is a fact and it cannot be changed that our loved ones, the great souls, they once existed and they nourished us. They, spread their, they formed and informed our minds with their radiance, and they took care of us, and our souls were dependent on them. They existed and they made this world a better place, and therefore we can be and be better, for they existed. So, because we know that they existed and because of them, this world has had a change, we can be and be better. We can also take inspiration from them. We can take motivation from them and we can be better for they existed. So after a time, it becomes clear that the contributions of great souls do not just disappear. After the death of great souls, their ideas will continue to live on and make the world a better place. So the poet is trying to say that even in death, the great souls have the power to change the world through the loved ones who have taken inspiration from them. They continue to make a change in the world and affect humanity. Poet says that at that time we will feel, grief and sadness, depression, isolation, etc. But after some time it gives way to acceptance. A period of peace blooms and we get the, we accept the fact that our loved ones, they have left us, and also our senses will never be the same like it was before, but gradually we we get the feelings and we are able to perceive emotions, and our senses whisper to us that our loved ones, they once existed and they made a change in the world and in our lives, and because of their memories and inspiration we can be and be better, for they existed because they were once alive, and nothing can change the fact that once they were a part of our lives. We can be and be better. We can also try to make a significant change in the world and show the world that it is because of the inspiration of our loved ones that we can be and be better. Why? Because the great souls once existed. So here we see that loss is traumatic, but still it is an inevitable part of human experience that leaves our loved ones in despair and misery. But this stanza tells us that beyond the emptiness and sense of loss, is at some point we will get, hope for healing. And these last lines that you can see, They existed, they existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. These words give new meaning and seem to bring fresh purpose to life. The poet declares that because this great soul existed, we can be better. So the loved ones are comforted by the assurance that others who have felt such pain have not only healed, but they can be made better human beings simply from having known the great soul. We might never be the same again because the pain, the sorrow, and the isolation may never leave us. But the memory and the influence of the great soul will linger, and they will continue to shape and affect our lives. So the poet here declares that because this great one existed, we can be better versions of our life and inspire others, and we can also become a great soul because of the motivation of the great soul. I hope this is clear to you. Here we come to the end of the explanation of this poem. I hope I have done justice to this poem by doing line by line detailed explanation. I hope you have made notes and also made note of the keywords. So now let us look at the theme of this poem. The first theme is loss of a loved one brings grief and acceptance. Now there are various themes for this poem. You can also bring your own themes, and you can justify your themes by giving an explanation based on your own understanding or based on the keywords and key points that we have discussed earlier. You can come up with your own themes and justify them properly, and as long as you justify them properly and use words from the text, the important keywords, you will get your respective marks. So this is the second theme, which is individual greatness and cultural change. I have explained all of this. You can take points from here as well and add it in your answers. So now let us move ahead to identify the various figures of speech which include poetic devices. The first poetic device is anaphora. I have done a detailed video on the various figures of speech. Kindly refer to that video for better understanding. Anaphora means repeating of words at the beginning of successive sentences to create emphasis and rhythm. So in all the stanzas, the first line will be when great trees fall, when great souls die, and when great trees fall. So all of this is repetition. You can see here. All of this is repetition, and therefore the figure of speech used here is anaphora. Speech is epistrophe. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly. These two lines are examples of epistrophe. Polyptoton. Our minds formed and informed by their radiance fall away. This is also an example. Next figure of speech is epizereus. They existed, we can be and be. So this is also an example of repetition as well. You can use that also. Next we have alliteration. Alliteration refers to the repetition of a certain letter in a sentence. For example here, when great trees fall in forest. So trees has I'm sorry. So when great trees fall, there's an F in forest. So F is repeated. So this is an F sound we can hear prominently. Second, small things recoil into silence. So S is repeated. Small things recoil into silence. S is repeated. After a period, peace blooms. So again here P is repeated. So it's a P sound that you can hear. So therefore that's alliteration. Next figure of speech is accidental. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. Another example is examines nose on kind words unsaid and promised walks never taken. So these are all the figures of speech. You can also add another poetic device, which is metaphor, because the poet has compared the falling of great trees to the death of great souls. So that is also a metaphor that you can add in your answers. So with that, we come to the end of this poem, When Great Trees Fall. I hope I have made everything clear, and I hope you have taken notes and made note of the keywords as well. I hope this video was of great help to you. Let me know if you have anything more to add to what I have said or shown in this video. It will be a great help for many. Let me know if you want the question and answers for this poem. So stay tuned and thank you so much for watching. Let us meet again in another educational video. Till then, thank you and happy learning.